There we go. So, same place down in Sunnyvale, but they're going to refresh the network fundamentals course. Network fundamentals, routing policy and routing fundamentals. They added one of the Cisco classes into the Juniper class, which is what is required. So, you may want to check that out. April 30th and May 20th, I think, right? And it's 4 days now, which is what it needs to be. So the dates are somewhere on here. There, April 29 to May 2nd and May 20 to May 23. So, what's that? Yes, it is. Yes, you got to sign up fast. If you want to get through, email me.
Oh, wait, is that the pass for NetTech? Is it for Muscom?
What's that?
Is that the freebie pass like for the 14th to 15th?
I don't know anything about that. No. Yeah. This is Juniper certification classes. I took them earlier. It's good stuff, but normally I'd only recommend it for people who have taken some Cisco classes. Yeah, yeah. All right. And Allison Miller was really very interesting yesterday, day before.
No, I meant the development conference. That's when I meant.
Yeah, I don't know about this thing. I never was able to find out about those free passes. Some students said they had free passes and then they vanished. So I think I'm not going to take that link off. As far as I can tell, there aren't any free passes available that I can find. What is it?
I think it's around like $200-$300.
$200-$300, yeah. And this Tech Days thing is $300, although there's some talk of letting students, they might get some students in for free if they volunteer. And there's another possibility you might get students in at like $100. If people are interested, let me know. But, all right. Anyway, let's see what else up in the news other than these announcements. Yeah, Bitcoin is kind of entertaining. So that's funny, just that same night that Allison came, I said I didn't believe Bitcoin would stay up at 200 and it dropped down to 100 at night. But, you know, it is, you can invest in commodities, and commodities are famous for this, like oil and wheat and pork bellies. They go up and down like crazy. The corn and stuff, to some extent, is related to like the amount of corn they can grow and the weather and stuff. But the rest of it is just crazy, like stamps and baseball cards. They go up and down as they go in and out of fashion. So people like to do it because you can get really, really rich. There are moments where they go really up really fast for no reason. And in principle, if you're lucky, you could buy it here and sell it there. But in practice, you usually lose everything because they're very risky. Because there's just no predicting whether they're going to go up or down, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. Anyway, I don't know. These people do invest in commodities, and so maybe there's somebody around here who knows how to do it. Mining them. Yes, you can mine your own Bitcoins, and it is designed to make sure you lose money. Although you might not lose money now. The original plan was to carefully make sure that the cost of the electricity to run your computer would always exceed the value of the Bitcoin. But then Bitcoins rose, so I would imagine that right now mining them would probably be a net gain of money. But it takes time to mine them, and Lord knows what the price will be. But they became fashionable over the last few months. More people are actually taking them for payment, which will be entertaining if that continues. But I think it's, I don't understand why Bitcoin exists, and I think the more people look into it, the more they also don't understand why Bitcoin exists. There have been other digital currencies that just vanished. This one should scare people to death a bit. This will get some attention. And this one's probably kind of fun to look at. All right.
What's the Tech Days ban in Germany?
What's that?
Tech Days ban in Germany.
Yes, Tech Days is apparently banned. The website can't be opened in Germany. I put up the website on Twitter, and my German Twitter followers started complaining that it says banned. And so I found a website you can go to where you can test your website from like 50 locations around the world. And sure enough, you can't see it for Germany. So nobody knows why. It's probably something to do with the hosting provider. That's an interesting thing. Anyway, so this guy took over an airplane with an Android smartphone. Or I think what he did was demonstrate it was possible. I don't think he really took over a real airplane, or he probably wouldn't be free wandering around giving talks at conferences. But he found out that the control protocol for airplanes, this is the Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast System, has no security at all. The same thing is true of GPS signals for your car. This was something I saw at DEF CON about 3-4 years ago. There's an Italian group of hackers that are very entertaining. They make these videos where they act out plays, and they always do something ridiculous. And this time they sent fake signals to GPS to reroute cars to wherever they want to go. Because there's no password or authentication on that. So you can just tell them that there's rain or fog or bridge out anywhere you want, and their car will just believe it and reroute them. And apparently the same thing's true of the aircraft systems. There is no security at all, so he's able to just take a modified Android phone and send out signals that will trick the air traffic control, the pilot into getting signals they shouldn't be getting. So anyway, they should probably fix that. What's that?
Shouldn't that have been something that they silently patch?
Well, that's actually an interesting idea. Yeah, normally one would think you might want to have what they call responsible disclosure here, where first you tell them and give them a time to patch it, and then you tell them when it's all over. Now that you mention it, I didn't think of that, but this is like considered impolite to just dump it out like this. But they say they didn't give the precise nature of the code flaws. But they don't need to if there's no security. It's kind of obvious anyway. So yeah, now that you mention it, normally you would tell them and wait until they fix it before you tell everybody. Don't seem to have done that, do they? Well, it depends on where they come from. If this is in Amsterdam, that's probably why. So I would imagine the researcher is not American. And researcher at N runs. I don't know. But that's a good point. However, even in America, I've been assured by lawyers you can never get in trouble for doing this. Although, boy, I wouldn't mess with airplanes. But you, what's that? Well, the point is, you see, in America, supposedly you have free speech, and if you reveal a vulnerability without warning people first, that is not a crime. I've been told this. If there's any vestige of benefit in what you're saying, you're protected. The only thing you're not allowed to say in America is you're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. So.
Or libel.
What's that?
Libel or slander.
Right, libel and slander. But if you reveal a vulnerability, and there really is a vulnerability, then there is some argument that that is benefiting the world, and therefore your speech is not wholly malicious. So supposedly, you could reveal this without telling the airplane people first and not go to prison in America, but I don't think I'd want to try it in this post-9/11 world. There are special problems for terrorism and stuff. And boy, I don't know. You might end up having to answer some unpleasant questions. So here's a botnet. They interviewed a guy that runs botnets, and it's entertaining to see what he says. He has a botnet of about 500,000 machines, and he talks about how he creates his botnet and how he uses it to make money. And it's interesting. So he uses a very simple old-fashioned technique here of using IRC channels to control his botnets. According to this guy, he says Cloudflare is useless, it's all just fake. You just hit them with more bots. I doubt that too, but you get used to this stuff. If you do anything opposing online criminals, they will always brag about how all your defenses are useless and cops are all stupid and stuff. That's the way it always works. But anyway, you do get to learn a bit more about botnets from the inside. Anyway, so you got another chapter to finish up here. Anybody got any questions or anything? Well, let's carry on.
That article about anonymous identities is one guy. Is it a chapter?
I don't know. I know Anonymous is doing a lot of fake hacks these days. They really seem to have lost their mojo. They pretended to hack Israel about twice, and that stuff was fake. About the last 5 or 6 major dumps have all been fake. I can usually Google the password hashes, you can find them.
No, I meant this guy. We'll get to
he'll come up to, yeah. We'll come up to, Aaron Barr was not fake. They really hacked him. Yes, we'll be talking about that, yes. That was back a couple of years ago when Anonymous was actually a pretty powerful force. Now they really seem, now Anonymous is just an FBI sting operation, and anybody with the slightest sense stays miles away from them. Even if they're a criminal, you might as well just walk right into prison and say, please lock me up. I mean, so only the very stupidest people participate anymore, I think, in the illegal parts of Anonymous ops. Because they're absolutely, totally infiltrated. They're all just looking for more people to turn in to decrease their sentences. So, I mean, you might as well, be the drug mules. Anyway, it's just ridiculous. It's an incredibly stupid form of crime, as crime goes. Anyway, so business continuity. Are we in the right place here? I think we are. Yeah, we're coming. Okay, so business continuity is planning how you're going to survive after a disaster. And the disaster recovery plan is part of it. This is how you get back temporary business right after a disaster. Like your building burns down, you have some plan to still carry on business quickly. That's business continuity. Pardon me, you only get it right. Business continuity is the temporary measures to keep you going while there's a problem. Disaster recovery is when you completely recovered, go back to your original location with all the original stuff fixed and working. Right, so disasters are, of course, fire and flood, significant failures of hardware and software, and terrorism and war, which are things that people didn't worry about that much in America, although they worried about it very much in Europe. but now we worry about it a lot more in America because terrorism is a lot bigger here of various kinds. So it is not at all far-fetched that you will get hacked by somebody for political goals, which is the most common kind of terrorism, and the poster child for this is H.B. Gary. The rootkits for the government uses and the military uses are written by an independent contractor, just like a lot of our weapons are developed by independent contractors, and that is the company H.B. Gary. And H.B. Gary is owned and run by a man who is the world expert on rootkits, and he diversified. He decided to make a second spin-off division called H.B. Gary Federal. And this was supposed to somehow sell some other kind of service to the federal government, and we were having trouble getting the company started. So Aaron Barr, who was in charge of the H.B. Gary Federal Division, decided to develop a tool to track people through social networks. And he made an automated tool that would look at IRC channels and MySpace and Facebook and Twitter, and it would correlate what it saw. So if one person said something and then immediately 5 other people say it on other social networks, that proves that those are all the same people, or they're at least close associates. And therefore you could figure out who's in the gangs. And this was back in 2011 when the Anonymous and Lulset gangs, which were law enforcement, now they claimed to be a decentralized leaderless movement, but everybody in professionalness knew that was a complete lie, and law enforcement knew that was a lie. What it really was 1 or 2 small gangs of 4 or 5 people with leaders and plans, and you could find those people and lock them up. And you have to find them, and they certainly are using fake names and changing their name periodically in various networks. So this idea is not a bad idea. You could track what they're saying and find out who they really are. But he implemented it poorly, and he claimed to know who all the anonymous leaders were, and he published it in the newspaper, in a journalist. Article that was published on the web saying, tomorrow I'm going to release the names of all the Anonymous members. So Anonymous hacked him and dumped out all his data, which is actually very typical of Anonymous. Now, other political and military organizations don't endanger their own troops, but Anonymous doesn't even know who their troops are, so they say they have no compunction about endangering their own troops like crazy. So dumping out his data, that would require knowing he was wrong. And how can they know he's wrong if they got no leaders and they don't even know who each other are? But they just don't care. They just dumped out all his data. But it was a devastating attack. Dumped out all his emails, which is, again, if you're a real spy agency or police agency or the military, you don't dump out a whole email log because that's crazy. You implicate all sorts of innocent people are in an email log. You may have people about medical conditions and secret affairs and financial dealings and stuff that have nothing to do with whatever your primary point was that are implicated. You just dump out logs of email. But the result was he was afraid for his life. And he ended up not even attending RSA. A booth at RSA, the biggest security conference in the world in San Francisco, is not cheap at all. It's like $10,000 or $12,000. And the H.B. Gary Federal booth sat there empty with a sign saying that they've been receiving death threats after the hack of Anonymous, and they're afraid to even show up, afraid somebody would kill them. So this is terrorism. And that's why a lot of people attack me, because I say Anonymous is terrorists, and they react very badly to that. And this is something to know. If you deal with a criminal, every criminal I've ever dealt with, if you call them a criminal, they get really, really mad. And if you call them exactly what they are, they hate your guts and scream and swear mud all over you. They all survive by lying about what they are. And Anonymous is a straight-up terrorist movement. They threatened the Supreme Court. They destroyed this company. They do death threats. They mail threats to your house. The only thing they haven't really done, as far as anybody can tell, is physically kill people yet, because they are mostly sort of mentally disturbed children hiding in their mom's basement, afraid to leave the house. Like most online people that are really, really mean online, they're very passive and timid in real life. The two tend to go together. It's a common personality type. But they scare people. They scare companies and security professionals very, very badly. If you dare to say something about Anonymous and your company get hacked, you know you'll be fired. So almost everybody remains silent about them. Very few people can speak out against them. Anyway, it hardly matters now because the FBI has infiltrated them like crazy, and their own leader for 6 months was controlled by the FBI and handing everything over to them. So they basically are an FBI operation now. But anyway, this is something people really worry about. What if some politically motivated bunch of people mess with you? They could completely destroy your company, like this one. So you got to have a plan. Now this is the hard part. If you want to protect your business, you have to decide how important all the parts of your business are. And that is the kind of thing people really don't like. That is basically what's been going on for the last couple of years here at this college during the accreditation nightmare. They wanted us to do this, and the college has, I think, successfully refused to do this. I wanted it to happen personally, But this is contrary to the entire San Francisco ethos to imagine that one department might be more important than another. Everything is a beautiful snowflake and flower, and humans have these holistic development, and the poetry is just as important as the technical stuff. And you know, hard-hearted people like me that would like to see vocational training that leads to a job and cut everything else are just cruel, soulless, rotten people that should not control the company. And that seems to be what's happening. I came from the private sector. Anything that doesn't accomplish the goal is just cut off and fired. They don't act that way here. Anyway, but that's a business impact analysis. How much would it hurt our business if every part of it was gone? And that's how you choose what part you need to protect, what part you can outsource, what part you can afford to have down for a week, and so on. Then you make strategies and plans of how you're going to keep your those part of your business recovering after disaster, and test them, and you have to keep updating it because your business keeps changing and the threats keep changing. So business impact analysis is the part everybody doesn't like, where you decide how important certain parts of the company are. And in the private sector, you certainly do this all the time, because there are things like you could fire all your IT staff and outsource that. You could fire your help desk people and outsource that to India. I mean, whole parts of your company could just be removed at any time, and that might be the right decision too, and you have to be looking at it. What would the consequences be of eliminating this part of the company and outsourcing it? Like I said, almost everybody has given up owning servers and backup tapes and network cables for their server presence. This is a stupid decision for almost any company. It is much better to just outsource it to Amazon. Put your stuff on Amazon, let them take care of the power and the backup and everything. Just control it remotely. For almost every business, you save money and get better results that way. It took me years to get the college to move. I very much wanted the college to move to Gmail, which we finally have, because we were totally unable to run our own email server and keep them up and do it right. And I said, this is just stupid. We could have Gmail for free. And this argument eventually won after many years. Many companies have discovered the same thing. Just outsource it to a huge company where they have professionals that are running those servers, and it's so much better than having your own network staff try to run a server and maintain it and all that jazz. Anyway, so if you do, when you're going to determine how important the parts of your business are, then you're going to determine how to recover after disaster. There's two separate things. The recovery time objective is how long it's going to take to recover. So if the building burns down, how long before we can get some part of the business up, like billing, where we bill our clients. Computers are gone, we're going to have some plan whereby we can run backup tapes on other computers, bring them back up, get the people back to work. So at what point will we resume billing our customers? And the other one is recovery point objective. Some of your data is probably gone forever. For example, if you back up every night, then you might lose a whole day's worth of data. You might have done all the work up till 4 p.m. and then have the building burned down, and the only backup tape you have is from yesterday. So you can recover, but you can only recover up to yesterday. So your recovery point objective is 24 hours. You're going to have to do 24 hours of work over. If that's not acceptable, you're going to have to come up with a better backup system, like the one they were talking about, Pacific IT Pros last time. They had Veeam or something with this company, and they have essentially continuous backup, like every 5 minutes. And that's what they do at stock markets. They just have continuous backup going off-site, so even if a bomb hits the building, they know exactly how many financial trades were done up to like within the last few seconds, because it matters a lot. And it's not okay to tell all the traders, I'm sorry, we're just going to roll your accounts back and do all the trades from yesterday. That's really not acceptable in the stock market. So anyway, that's your game. So the business impact analysis determines how important is something, how long can we do without it, and how much of it do we really mind doing over. And you look at those numbers, you're basically deciding how important all the different parts of your business are. So you have to figure out what assets you have, what functions they perform, and what you're going to have to do. How do you back it up? Do you need alternate sites? What about utilities? Electricity goes out a lot around here, and it goes out for a large part of the city. So it could well be that your alternate location also has no power. So you better have a plan for that. So when you rate your equipment, you can rate it this way. There's mean time between failure and mean time to restore. Mean time between failure is how long equipment tends to last under normal conditions. Hard drives are rated with 100,000 hours mean time between failure or something. Some of them fail sooner, some fail later. And mean time restore is how long it's going to take to restore your stuff. A mean time to restore is a pretty weak promise from a company. It'd be a lot better to have maximum time to restore. That's a service level agreement. People will promise, like HP. HP sold us a bunch of wireless stuff. It came with a service level agreement that said if it broke, they would replace it within 24 hours. What happened was the wireless equipment never worked. They did replace it. The replacement didn't work, and that was the end of that. The stuff never worked. We finally gave it and went to another vendor. It didn't really do us that much good. But as far as I know, they did in fact replace it within 24 hours with another copy of the same thing that didn't work, which fulfilled their contract. So this also happened to Amazon. Amazon went down for 4 days, so nobody could do any online shopping at any of those companies. And yet Amazon said we did not fail to fulfill our agreement, because their service level agreement said that the website will be up and you can still make further instances of the same virtual machine. Nothing was promised about the database working. So technically they still delivered what they promised to deliver, but the fact is you couldn't get any business done. So that happens a lot. Because what people find out when they wreck their car, and then the insurance company says, well, the way you wrecked your car doesn't count. You don't get your pay, because technically that was an act of God or something. So then you got a continuity of operation plan. This is how you're going to move to another location. And there's 3 ways to do it. The most expensive is a hot site, where you have another site and everything is ready to go. The stuff has got power, the stuff has got continuous data uploads, everything's all set to go, a whole nother building ready to go. A cold site is the opposite. You've got a room and you have to do a lot of work to get it going. And a warm site is somewhere in between. So, of course, the cold site is cheapest and the hot site is most expensive. And this one's kind of fun. AT&T's disaster team. I don't think I'll play this video, but it's I got a chance to go down a few years and view this with my students, and it is very impressive. AT&T and the major telephone providers have really serious disaster recovery, because when the telephone lines go down, people start dying. This is a big deal. I talk to people at hospitals and stuff. Normally people that are in the hospital for days at a time, they are really, really sick, like almost ready to die these days. 20 years ago, people would be in the hospital for relatively minor things, but home care has gotten so good that 90% of the people that would have to spend like 4 days in the hospital are just going home the first day now. But what they're doing when they're at home is they're wearing something like an EKG that's going to the telephone line that will call them if their heart stops or if they stop breathing. So when the telephones go down, people start dying as those monitors go off and they can't get the call through. And in disasters like hurricanes and fires, there are people with obvious problems like trapped in burning buildings and trapped under rubble and with broken arms and stuff, trying to call 911. And if the phone lines are down, they can't get the help they need. So it is really important for these guys, and they don't mess around. They have trucks. They have like these trucks with these containers, about 5 of them. One of them is all full of power generators. Another one is all full of fiber optic cables and switches. Another one is full of like bathrooms and kitchens for the staff. And they have an armed guard in the front, an armed guard in the back, and a convoy of about 5 of these trucks. They can drive into it, vacant lot, put cables between the trucks, turn on the generator, and have a cell phone switching station up in like 3 hours in the middle of like a tornado. And they do all the time. That's one of the things they do. It's very impressive to see their stuff. And the value of the stuff in those trucks is like tens of millions of dollars. So they have to have armed guards also in the team. And they have a special team of people that are assigned to show up and drive that stuff off to wherever they need emergency telephones. Yeah.
Where was it taken?
What's that?
The disaster drill.
Yeah, that was a while ago. I went to a couple.
I mean, where?
Where what? Oh, I saw it in down in like San Jose, is where I saw it. Yeah. But they've got quite a few. They've got teams all over the place. So that's right. A hot site is where you got everything all ready to go, and the backup tapes are already there. That's expensive, but you can quickly recover. Maybe just a matter of a few hours after your building is destroyed, you can immediately have business happening, resuming in the other building. A cold site, there's a room available, it's got power, but serious things are missing. Like you have to actually bring in equipment, turn it on, run tapes to load it up and all that jazz. It's going to take you days to recover if that's what you have for an alternate location. And a warm site is in between. Like this has the previous generation of equipment that became obsolete, which you stuck there, which can technically do some of it. In fact, there will be problems. Yeah?
About human resources. If you have a far location, it's going to be hard to move everybody to the location.
You have to plan for all that.
Location can be affected also.
That's very important. You have to plan for that. So you either have to plan. Another thing is your humans may be hurt by the disaster. So they might be in the hospital and totally unavailable, or the roads might be flooded out, so you can't transport them there. So you have to plan for all these things. And of course, there's some level of disaster you can't handle. You just have to plan. You accept the most extreme disasters, depending on who you are. But yeah, I mean, in a serious enough disaster, you're going to need entire replacement staff over there, because these people can't get there, or all these people got killed when the building collapsed or something, and so you've got to have alternate people. So mobile sites, Are these transportable ones in the truck, like I was talking about the AT&T disaster recovery? That's one good way, of course. If you can get your business done in just a trailer that you can drive around, that can make it a whole lot easier. And a mirrored site is the most perfect. You have a complete mirrored service connected over a network so that they immediately have copies of all the data. This is how Google works. Google has a bunch of container, railroad containers full of servers connected by fiber optics. They bought all the dark fiber in the world about when they first went public about 6 years ago. Dark fiber is strands that are already used. If you want to lay fiber optic cable, fiber optic cable only costs a few dollars per foot, but the labor of pulling it through the tunnels under the ground costs a lot more than that. So what you do, if you need 12 strands of fiber, is you lay a cable with 72 strands of fiber in it, and you only use 12. Because if you want more later, just turning on more fiber is much cheaper than dragging another cable through. So a lot of dark fiber out there is dark. It's extra strands that companies aren't using, and Google bought most of it, just all over the whole world. And they're using it to connect all their data centers together this way. So they have many, many data centers all over the place, all synchronized with fast fiber optic links. Anyway, so that's the point here. Your mirrored site provides immediate failover if necessary. And then this is business continuity, where you somehow move to an alternate location and somehow have other computers and people and everything maintaining your business, but ultimately you want to recover back to your original location with everything back the way it should be, and that'll be disaster recovery, getting everything back to working at your original location. So that's your disaster recovery plan. And you may have various plans. A plan to recover the server and plans for other kinds of disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes and so on. And you'll have a prioritized list. So you recover whatever the most important thing is first, and you let the stuff that isn't that important wait till later. So there are phases. One big issue is activation. The same thing's true of security incidents. If something bad happens, well, I've seen this happen a lot, well, you know you have a leader. Like watch at Starbucks. You go to Starbucks and somebody starts making trouble. Like yelling, attacking the customers, throwing stuff around. And I watch the incompetent, less busy stores. People will look around. Am I supposed to do something? Is it time to do something? Who's the boss anyway? And nothing happens. The good place, there's somebody who looks at the one person, they say, okay, you do this, you do that. Somebody's in charge. They declare an incident and they do something about it quick. It's true. You need to have a person who is qualified to declare, okay, we now have a security incident, therefore we'll activate the security response plan, incident response plan. And the same thing for disasters. Somebody has to decide that this counts as a disaster. And you have to know who that is, and they have to know what you're supposed to do when there's a disaster. Then you do whatever's required to have contingency plans to get through the disaster, and then eventually you have recovery back to the original location, and you test the recovered systems to make sure they work, and then you document what you did and you review it to plan how you're going to handle the next disaster better, because nothing's ever perfect. And even if this went well, there are things that could have gone wrong, and things keep changing. So you do have to constantly improve your plan. Just to hold still, because the world keeps moving under you. You have to have a feedback loop. So contingency planning is just for the IT part, the IT contingency, but the business continuity will look at the whole thing. Another issue is succession planning. You have to have this in place anyway, because people quit and retire and get fired and stuff. But in the case of disaster, of course, people might vanish suddenly who weren't disgruntled because they got hurt in disaster, or they got so scared by this they're going to move to another part of the country that doesn't have earthquakes or something. And so you've got to have clear plans of who's going to take over. And during incident response, if the person who is supposed to fulfill a role is unavailable for some reason, you have to have a clear response of who will move in here. And this is, of course, where, at least from the outside, this is where the military supposedly have it all together. They know who's in charge, and they know who takes over if that person's unavailable quickly. At least theoretically. In private companies, it's usually not clear at all. The company I worked at, the first company, was a lot stupider. Somebody sent out some checks, and they were the wrong checks. So to fix that, they specified certain people, and they said no check distribution can ever go out except this person has to review it and this person write the checks, and he's on vacation, there'll be no distributions until he gets back. So they created multiple single points of failure in order to improve the accuracy of the system. And I really didn't think this was very intelligent at the time, but it's the opposite of this. Now, if one person is missing, the whole thing stops. Anyway, you have a hierarchical chain of command, and you know who can make decisions. If the boss is not there, and certainly that was a big problem at the companies I worked at. The boss was the only one that really knew what was going on. The boss was always too busy to deal with anything except emergencies, and so a lot of the time you were not sure what to do and you couldn't find out. Anyway, so you can have various forms of testing. You can do a tabletop exercise where people just talk through what's going to happen. You can do a simulation. Or you can do a full-blown test. This is one of the good things about Cloudflare. Very few companies have the guts to do real tests where you actually turn off systems during a working day. But Cloudflare does. You routinely turn off one of their data centers in the middle of a day and watch to make sure that all the others will smoothly take over. And what Matthew always says is you only lose one ping. You turn off San Jose and all the traffic immediately routes to other locations like Los Angeles, and you only lose 1 second worth of traffic. So anyway, so you've got to test that your servers will restore when the way they're supposed to, test that your backup servers work, and that your alternate sites are really ready to go, and that your backups are really there. As I mentioned before, if you don't test them, you will almost always find that the backups don't work, because there is no consequence on business function when the backups are done wrong, so they will naturally attract the worst staff, and you will eventually discover they've been doing it all wrong. Anyway, so I got a few iClicker questions. You can grab one if you need one. All right, so CCSF. As I say, it has been decided what programs are essential and which can be cut. So what is that process? All right, that is business impact assessment. How important are all these things on the function of our business? And that would require defining exactly what we do and measuring whether we actually accomplish it, which is not easy at all around here. So Sally decides to back up her work once a week. What term is the technical term for that week? All right. That is her recovery point objective, RPO. I see it all over the place, but the recovery point objective is how much work you might have to do over after recovery. Recovery time objective is how long it takes to do the recovery. But if you only back up your stuff once a week, you might lose a whole week's worth of work. That's your recovery point. Even when recovery works, that's the point to which it works, only to a certain point in time. All right, so which one of these moves your business to an alternate location temporarily? Continuity of operations planning, I think that's C. Yep, all right. I was expecting another one, but that's also a good one. Business continuity, all right. All right, continuous service during a disaster. That would, of course, be the best. That's what Cloudflare has, that's what Google has. If a site goes down, you will never even notice. You just continue to get service uninterrupted. All right, and the only thing that can do that is a mirrored site. A hot site doesn't give you that. A hot site just means everything is ready to go, but there's still a matter of hours typically to get it going. You have to play backup tapes or something at that end. A mirrored site means it's constantly synchronized with the other one, and it can just totally take over with no noticeable loss of function. All right. So, then you got environmental controls. There's good old stuff. You got to do something about fire, legally and also, for many other good reasons. So for the fire to happen, you got to have fuel, oxygen, heat, and some kind of chemical reaction going on, and you can prevent the fire by blocking any of those steps. So you can remove the heat with water, so the thing is too cold or with cold gas. You can remove the oxygen by displacing it with another gas, which is a favorite in server rooms where you don't want water going around or chemicals. Just replacing it with a neutral gas like CO2 would put out the fire without damaging the electronics. The problem is that's dangerous for people. You can also remove the fuel, which is typically not an option for us, so it's for more like forest fires and stuff. They cut down the trees and move them so they won't burn so much. And you can there are some chemicals that actually block the chain reaction that's going on during the fire. So there's classes of fire extinguisher. Class A is water, basically. It's just to put out wood and paper and stuff like that, to stop buildings from burning down, which is the #1 old-fashioned typical concern of fires. You just don't want the whole building to burn down. Class B is for flammable liquids, like gasoline and such, because if you put water on an oil fire, you just make it worse because the oil floats on the water and you move the burning stuff further around and just make the fire worse. Class C is for electrical, computers and wiring. It is not intended to preserve the computers, it's just intended to effectively put those fires out because, again, water isn't very effective against them. And Class D is for exotic things like combustible metals, not really of great importance to most people. So those are the basic fire extinguisher codes, and you'll see them written on your fire extinguishers, A, B, C, D, and all that jazz. If you cool computers, that makes them more available. The traditional rule of server farms is that server farms should be very, very cold. They're typically so cold that people are wearing like jackets and parkas as they walk around and work on them, and they pay for a lot of air conditioning to keep them really cold. They think that extends the life of them. Now, Google completely changed the rules on this about 3 years ago. Google did some real research, and they decided that it was perfectly fine for the servers to run at 80 degrees. So the Google server administrators are wearing like flip-flops and shorts and t-shirts. It's like a sauna in there. And here's typically what you do. You have hot aisles and cold aisles. You have all these servers mounted here, and they all have their cooling fans blowing in here. So this is the hot aisle. And you have a ventilation system that sucks the air out of the hot aisle and cools it and puts it back in the cold aisle. And your people walk through the cold aisles, controlling the equipment. The hot aisle is too hot for them to be in. That's typically how you arrange it. And so here's the plan of it. The hot air is flowing out here, going through the cooling unit, coming back in the cold aisle. And all your server racks are designed this way. So the cold side is for humans and the hot side is for the back of the equipment. And you adjust it to heat whatever you think is the optimum temperature. Before Google started moving their stuff up to 80 degrees, they were doing other things like putting server farms in places like Iceland and Alaska where it's just cold, because it would save them so much money to not pay for the cooling that it was worth the cost of laying more fiber to move the data up there. I've often thought we should do it here. That room gets hot. That room has a ton of junipers and Cisco's in it. And I just keep thinking I would just like to open the window and put in a normal fan, because it's cold enough out here.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you just open the window? It's so
We
hot.
could. The problem is it might rain in the window, and that would be a problem. So anyway, we've been talking about it. Meantime, we're just letting it be kind of hot in there, which is the Google solution. Yeah.
Problem with that is that now you got to start dealing with outside particles in the air, and you're going to be cleaning the servers more with dirt and dust and mold.
Yes, that's true. That's another advantage of air conditioning. It also gets particles out of the air and stuff, so you don't have as much dust. And dust is bad too, because dust builds up on the components, and then the component overheats because the air can't travel close enough to it. So yeah, that's a big issue. That's why home computers are usually an incredible mess. The Register has a funny article, all the stuff they found in home computers. People put their home computer on the ground and they have like a cat, and after a while that whole thing is totally balled up with lint and fur and stuff, and then it doesn't work anymore. Anyway, humidity is also bad for computers. You don't want low humidity, or you will get electrostatic discharge as people walk around. You don't want high humidity, or you get corrosion on the components, so people say it should be around 50% is what you should do. And air conditioners also control the humidity. Anyway, you often integrate your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system with your fire alarms because you don't want the ventilation system to make the fire worse by blowing air over it or by blowing the smoke around too much. So it often turns off when it detects a fire in the sprinklers. And you can decide how you want these things to work. There's one thing called Failsafe, which is also called Fail Secure and Fail Closed, which means if something goes wrong, the system stops working. It stops providing service. This is the way you configure a highly confidential server. If there's a problem, turn it off because maybe somebody's hacking into it. But doors are typically the opposite. They're fail open. If something goes wrong, for example, at a lot of companies, if the electrical power goes out, so the magnetic card readers won't work in the doors open because they don't want someone to be trapped inside. And therefore, this is one of the attacks. Go find the circuit breaker, turn off the power, and then you can get in the server room. And I mentioned, I think before, this kind of door we have here that detects you coming in and swipes open, those things usually have a motion detector on the inside as well, and usually even when you lock them, the inside motion detector will still open the door because for liability reasons, they don't want someone trapped in the building, unable to get out in case there's a fire in here. And so you can break into them. The penetration testers do this. There's one where you reach in with a coat hanger with a card and you wave it around inside. There's another where you stick a pipe in and you blow up balloons and let them float up there. You're trying to turn on the motion sensors inside. They were talking about this at B-Sides. They said one of the things about the balloons is if it doesn't work, it's really hard to explain. When someone comes to work the next morning, there's like 10 balloons floating around the room. Yeah.
Why can't they make a door that is constantly open from inside but not from outside?
Well,
They can get rid of motion detectors. You can't simply open the door from inside.
well, so you could. You could just do it with various mechanical means. I'm thinking, but then you'd be able to reach in from the outside. For example, those hotel things where you put the chain on, you can reach in from outside with like dental floss and stuff and move it back. If you had some kind of lever on there, you could just reach around with that. I mean, everything, there's always some way to hack it. But anyway, the other thing they showed at B-Sides was they had doing a physical penetration test on the server room, and they had sliding glass doors, and you had to run the magnetic stripe to get in, but no one actually ever tried to force this. You just went up and pushed, and they just opened. There was like actually not much resistance to just forcing them open. Anyway, all right. So Failopen is something that turns off security measures when it fails if availability is more important than protecting it. Yeah?
Professor Taha was showing us a device that could use electrical current to send a signal and to have a matching one to pick it up when we're talking about the doors. I was wondering, is there any way that you could use power, the regular power cables in the building to make it send a signal to?
Well, I'm sure you could. I mean, you can use power lines to remove networking traffic. So you can, if the doors want to see wired Ethernet, you can totally have wired Ethernet go to the power line. So sure, any kind of wire can carry signal. Ordinary old telephone wires and power lines can both carry data. They just can't carry really high bandwidth data, but you can get up to 10 or 100 megabits per second. So there's nothing wrong with that. Another kind of cool door feature, which I've always wanted up in the lab, is you can have Bluetooth phones that send a Bluetooth pulse to let you in, if you get the right kind of reader. And those are nice because you can easily change them. You can give each person an individual one. Anyway, fail closed is where you have something that when there's a error condition, it stops providing service. So, for example, a firewall, where if anything happens that the firewall didn't expect, it blocks all access. Because it's more important to stop the bad guys from getting in than to always let the good guys in. Something you do if confidentiality is more important than availability. So shielding is a big issue. This started with a military Tempest project where they said, you know, how safe are cathode ray tubes are the main focus there. Cathode ray tubes are the old, we don't even have any in this room anymore, the old big TV sets that have like 30,000 volts of accelerated electron beam blasting up on the screen, tracing out the light to draw the picture, and that's emitting a ton of radio. And they showed with the Tempest project that they could totally sit in another room, turn on a radio antenna, and pick up that radio signal and reconstruct the picture on the screen from the emitted radio. So the end result of it is the only way to be safe is to work in a basement that's got metal all around, or build a Faraday cage where you just put wire mesh all around you so the radio doesn't leave your vicinity. And that is still true to a large extent, although it's not as bad as it was back in the days of CRTs. Even laptops and keyboards and stuff do send radio out every time you do anything. You type on the keyboard, the signals go from keyboard to the computer, and they emit radio, and you can pick that up. So it's a big issue. One cure for that would be to shield the cables. That's the simple cure. If you just pay a little bit more, you can get shielded twisted pair. Instead of unshielded twisted pair, they just put tinfoil outside it, inside the plastic sheath, and ground it, and that stops most of the radio from leaking out. You can also use fiber optics if you're really serious. And fiber optics have pulses of infrared light, and they don't emit any radio outside the cable at all, so you're completely immune. But it's more expensive. The connectors at the end are quite expensive. And one of the most irritating things about fiber optics is they have to be clean. When I talk fiber optics, you get fiber optic certification, and I talk to people who are hiring students, this is the number one thing we need is hygiene. You have to always clean the end of the cable. A fingerprint will totally ruin it. So you have to be very concerned all the time about fingerprints and dust with fiber optics. That's the problem. You're sticking two pieces of glass together, and even a little bit of failure from the totally mesh will completely degrade the signal. Anyway, here's a fun video. Came out a couple of years ago. This guy made an antenna that big, and with an antenna this big, he was able to reproduce every keystroke typed on a keyboard like this across the whole building, like 30 meters away. Because that's like 3 or 6 feet of wire, and that's a big antenna. Every time you press a key, that wire emits radio. And you know, in principle, you could do it in the next galaxy if it had a big enough radio telescope. I mean, that's the problem. Radio goes forever. So you put yourself in a Faraday cage, and you'll see these at like this sort of thrilling Mythbusters kind of places. Now, normally, if you do work on a computer in the Faraday cage, then all the radio won't get out. But if you have a spark gun shooting sparks, they can't get to you in the Faraday cage like a shark cage. And it's a grounded container, so all the electricity will go through the wire to the ground and not go in or out. This is why you have RF shields on your devices. If you look at the motherboard in your computer, the processor runs at a really high speed, like gigahertz, and that's going to emit radio that will interfere with television broadcasts. So the Federal Communications Commission requires them to have that shield on there. Without the shield, it'll interfere with radio and TV in the neighborhood. That shield is a Faraday cage for just the one component that emits the most radio in the frequency that the FCC forbids your computer to use, and that's what it's for. I thought this was pretty good. I went to HOPE last year in New York City at Hacking Conference, and they had a tinfoil hat contest. But when these guys have a tinfoil hat contest, they're not messing around. They tested them with radio detectors and radio emitters to see which ones are really stopping the radio best, and that's how you won, which I thought was pretty cool. Because, of course, as you know, there's a certain number of people that really believe that there are mind control devices around and aliens controlling your brain and stuff, and you should wear a tinfoil hat. In San Francisco, they have the equivalent. I insulted one of our art teachers. She was wearing this funny piece of gold jewelry. She said, oh, that's, I said, what is that? Something like from Star Trek? She said, oh, no, that's my, she had this fancy name. You pay $100, you buy this thing, and it's supposedly soaking up all the dangerous radio that would poison your mind. People really believe this stuff. You know, San Francisco is big on this quasi-religious stuff. I carry this stone, and it makes me lucky or something. So it's real popular out here. And so Tempest was the original government program to test this for military applications, and what they found was really scary, that essentially every device you use is in fact sending signals that could easily be picked up from far away to find out what you're doing. And when this thing came out about 3 years ago, and it hit all the security cons, this video, I thought there would be a market in shielded, wired. You could get a keyboard with a shielded cable. It would only cost another $5, but nobody cares. Like so many things, Fire Sheet came out, and you should totally get in everybody's Facebook. Next week, it's all over, nobody cares. This is the thing about security. You can easily get a bad attitude. You find out a terrible thing, you're the sensation, and next week, nobody cares, and nobody fixes it. It just goes on and on. You have to get used to it. Anyway, all right. So what kind of fire should you put out with water? All right, that's a type A extinguisher. It's just water, essentially. It's wood and paper. Simplest kind of fire that people have been thinking about for decades. All right, a fire in a computer server room. What kind of fire is that? All right, that is a Class C fire, electrical.
Those in the rack.
Yeah, but they label it by the largest one. Yeah, I mean, your extinguisher can be rated AC, which means you can use it on an A fire and a C fire. But the metal in the rack is not not Class D metal. That's not flammable metal. It's just ordinary metal. So the only thing you know about the computer server is it's got electrical stuff in there. You might also have wood, and it might not. It certainly doesn't have oil or anything, gasoline. So the only thing you really know is it's Class C. All right, to protect your server from overheating, which one does that? All right, that's your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, of course, which is a huge power expense, and a whole floor of 365 main is nothing but giant fans. In fact, in many places, the fans in the server that cool the servers are so loud that you have to wear earplugs. And the same is true 365 main. It's like going past a jet airplane to go in that room.
Like a power plant, where you need big.
Yeah. Yeah, just huge industrial things. And so which one of these was a military project to prevent secret data from leaking out? So that was Tempest, and it stands for something. Threat of emanation of protected data or something like that. I can't spell it out, but everything military is always an acronym. So let me try a few from the book. We got a little time here. HVAC, shielding. Hey, maybe I can find out what Tempest stands for. Are you going to tell me? Tempest. No, they don't tell me what it stands for. Ha. It does stand for something. All right.
Wait, I think I did tell you.
I didn't see it. Tempest is a government program. No, I don't think it's not an acronym. Oh, blast.
Oh, it is.
They said it's not. They say someone made just about tiny electromagnetic particles. Yeah, that's just a guess. It wasn't actually an acronym. They fooled me. They put it in caps and it doesn't stand for something. How cruel. All right, so, all right. So let's try number one here. An organization is not doing BCP. So what is it likely to overlook? Small businesses typically don't do BCP. It's the larger companies that begin to have a large management staff that actually think these things through, and they actually went to school and got business degrees and stuff and figured this out. All right, they are likely not to notice their single points of failure. That's the only one that fits the answer. Because unless you're thinking about it, you'll just casually use a device and think it's going to keep working. All right, so which of these gives you disk mirroring? All right, that is RAID 1 is disk mirroring. Yep, here we go. 2 whole copies of every file. All right, so which of these, let's do number 4, which of these removes a server as a single point of failure? All right, and they call that clustering. Clustering is where you have a group of servers, one can take over if the other fails. It's essentially the same thing as RAIDs, but that's the term you apply to servers. So if you want the fastest recovery of data, let's do number 7, what is the best solution? All right, a full backup daily is the fastest recovery because all you need is one tape and it's on there. These others, you'll need to play 2 or 3 tapes to recover the data, and that's both error prone and slow. By the way, Dream, I think it was, at the last Packet Pros, had this smart idea nobody thought of, which is you do an incremental backup, and then you merge it into your full backup and create the full backup you would have had offline, so it's as fast and easy as incremental, but you always have a full backup. Nobody ever thought of that for like 30 years. You've all been doing it in a stupid way. Anyway, they're right about that. All right, that's it. Let's do number 10. Which one of these identifies RPOs and RTOs? All right, that is the business impact assessment that does that. That's the point. This is what does the unthinkable thing of deciding what's important and what's not important around here. The important stuff has to be recovered promptly. The unimportant stuff, we can just let it slide. That's for business impact assessment. Let's do number 12 here. Your business impact analysis has determined that your RTO is an hour. So what kind of site do you need? All right, you need a hot site for that. You got to have everything really ready to go if you're actually going to resume business in an hour. That's pretty heroic. Basically, a hot site is anything within an hour or two. A warm site is the same day, and a cold site is slower than that. But let me just get the official answer here. Yeah, days for the cold site, typically something like an hour for a hot site. And in between is the warm site. But they're just separated by categories that make sense economically. I mean, the hot site is really expensive. You've got to have everything ready to go, all the versions, all the getting updated, backups right there, already on site, and so on. Really quite demanding. Let's try 16. See what we think of a disaster recovery exercise. All right, the only thing that makes any sense is testing the server restore. All the rest of these had to happen before the exercise, where you made the plan. All right, so let's try 18. They've used a disaster recovery plan to rebuild a server. So how do they verify its function? All right, the performance should be compared to a baseline. That's the only thing that makes any sense there.
How come you can't reveal it?
Because reviewing the recovery process does not verify that it worked. That would just mean, there's difference between the process and the result. You've done the process, but to make sure it worked, you have to test the result. Because there could have been a problem with your process. Very likely was. Like after you get a ghost of the server, there's something else that has to change, like the settings on the switch and the firewall. And the routers have to be set to go to the new location, and you didn't think of that because all you did was ghost the server. It's often the case that you do a process and you discover there's something you forgot to think about that means the end result doesn't work. This happens to me all the time at the first bad company. The network administrators would decide to change stuff. They would come in on the weekend. We would come in on Monday morning. All the trash cans would be full of beer bottles, and nothing would work every single time because they would come in and upgrade the routers or something. Then they would test it by seeing if it would ping end to end. Then they would go home, and every time we came in and booted up the database that we needed to handle customer transactions, it didn't work because they never tested that because they thought that wasn't their job. They would test it with something like ping and say it's done, but they wouldn't test what we really needed to get the work done and make sure that worked. This happens all the time. Anyway, let's try number 21 here. You're researching the costs of fire alarm systems. All right, you've got to integrate with the HVAC so it doesn't blow the fire around with the ventilation system. Let's just do number 26 here. You want to prevent someone from capturing network traffic. It's a little bit hard. Oh, it's not hard at all. Oops, okay. I thought B was a good answer, but it's backwards. Using hubs instead of switches makes it worse. Using switches instead of hubs. I read it backwards. Then there's only one that makes any sense here, which is EMI shielding. Okay, fair enough. That happens to me a lot. You've got to read the question carefully. So there's only one here that actually makes anything any better, and that's the EMI shielding. Okay.